Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, back to a world lit by firelight and governed by tradition, where the line between love and legal contract is blurry at best. Picture yourself not in your comfortable bed, but on a straw-stuffed mattress in a small timber-framed house. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Outside, there's no gentle hum of a city, just the sighing of the wind through the trees and the occasional bleat of a distant sheep. It's here, in this quiet, half-lit world, that you are about to get married. And based on the realities of the time, from medicine to basic hygiene, you probably won't survive this experience. It's just statistical. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always wonderful to see where you're all listening from, so feel free to post your city and the local time in the comments. It makes our little community feel a bit more connected. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first time you understand you are to be married, you are not old enough to truly grasp the concept. Perhaps you are 5, maybe 6. You are sitting on the packed earth floor of your family's home, pushing a small carved wooden knight across the uneven ground. Your world is one of simple textures, the rough wool of your tunic against your skin, the splintery feel of the toy, the cool smoothness of a stone your mother uses to prop open the door. In the main room, your father is speaking with another man. Their voices are low and serious, a murmur that rumbles through the thin wattle and daub walls. You don't understand the words. Phrases about acreage, livestock, and familial alliances drift past your ears without meaning. You are far more concerned with whether your wooden knight can vanquish the fearsome dust bunny that has taken refuge near the hearth. This, right here, is your betrothal. It is a moment of immense significance for your entire family, a mainstream practice for anyone with even a sliver of property or status to protect. Your future is a chess piece, being moved into position on a board you don't even know exists. Your consent is not required or even considered. It's a transaction. Your family gains a valuable connection, perhaps a bit of land that borders their own, or a political favor that could prove useful in a dispute. His family acquires a guarantee of legitimacy for their future heirs and a connection to your bloodline. You, the small child on the floor, are the living, breathing seal on the deal. Later, your mother might pull you aside and explain that one day you will go to live with the family of that nice man who brought a gift of salted fish. She will say it with a tone of finality, the same way she tells you that winter is coming or that the sun will rise. It is not a suggestion, it is a fact of your life. Historians still argue about the emotional reality of these arrangements, whether deep affection could grow from such a pragmatic root, or if it simply reset the definition of a partnership to something more akin to a business merger. For you, it's just a strange piece of adult news that you forget about 5 minutes later when a dog wanders into the yard. Years pass. The memory of that day is hazy, but the reality of it grows clearer with each passing season. You are a teenager now, and the wedding day is no longer a distant abstraction. It looms, and its most tangible presence is the dowry chest. It sits in the corner of the room where you sleep, a large, sturdy wooden box, smelling of fresh cut oak and linseed oil. It is your entire worldly value, condensed into a single container. Every few weeks your mother adds something new to it. You watch as she folds sheets of linen, bleached by the sun and smelling of grass. They are a true luxury, the product of countless hours of spinning, weaving and sewing. They are for your marriage bed, into the chest they go. Then comes a set of pewter plates, dull and heavy, a significant step up from the wooden trenchers your family uses daily. They clatter softly as they are nested together. Then a heavy wool blanket, dyed a deep, rich blue with expensive woad. It represents a small fortune in dye and wool alone. Your dowry isn't just about showing off your family's wealth, it's a practical starter kit for your new life. It's also your insurance policy. Should your husband prove to be a scoundrel or should he die unexpectedly, the dowry legally remains yours. It's the nest egg that keeps you from total destitution. A mainstream historical fact of medieval life is that a woman without a dowry had significantly fewer marriage prospects. But it's not all linens and pewter. You find yourself smiling a little at some of the other items. Your father, a practical man, has included a deed for a small plot of land, 3 pigs and a goat. You can just imagine yourself trying to stuff a goat into this chest. He laughs when you mention it, but the document representing them is very real, tucked into a small leather pouch. This is a classic example of a quirky tidbit from the era. Dowries were not just about finery, but about function. They often contained livestock, tools, cooking pots, and even a bed frame, disassembled and ready for transport. This wasn't about romance. It was about ensuring a household could run from day one. It was your medieval 401k with more goats and fewer quarterly statements. As you trace the carvings on the lid of the chest, you realize it is the most important piece of furniture you will ever own. Then comes the final stage before the wedding itself, the reading of the banns. For 3 consecutive Sundays, you must sit in the cold, damp stone church, feeling the weight of every eye in the village. Your local priest, Father Thomas, stands before the parish, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. After the sermon, he clears his throat and makes the announcement. He calls out your name and the name of your intended groom, stating your purpose to be joined in holy matrimony. He asks if anyone present knows of any impediment, any reason, legal or moral, why the union should not take place. The silence that follows is the loudest sound you have ever heard. You stare intently at the rough-hewn wooden crucifix, praying no one speaks. You don't particularly want to marry this man. You've only met him a few times, and he seemed mostly interested in the quality of your father's ale, but the public humiliation of an objection would be unbearable. You can feel the collective gaze of your neighbours. You know what they're thinking. They're calculating the worth of the match. The Pembrokes are joining with the Fletchers. Good for them. A solid piece of land there. What did she bring to the table? I heard her dowry includes 2 cows. You can almost hear their thoughts swirling in the air like dust motes in the thin shafts of sunlight piercing the gloom. The practice was formally mandated across Christendom by the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 to prevent secret or bigamous marriages. It was an attempt at legal transparency in a world without centralized records. For you, it's just 3 weeks of quiet, managed terror. You wish someone would just cough just to break the tension, but no one does. The priest moves on. 2 more Sundays to go. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding, your shoulders slumping just a fraction. The first hurdle is cleared. The gears of tradition are turning slowly and unstoppably, and you are being carried along with them. The morning of your wedding arrives not with a soft glow, but with a grey, chilly mist that clings to the thatch of the roof. There is a nervous energy in your small home, a flurry of activity that has little to do with you. Your mother and an aunt are fussing over your dress. It is not white. White is a difficult and expensive colour to maintain, and the idea of a white wedding is a peculiar notion that lies centuries in the future. Instead, your dress is a deep forest green, the fabric a heavy, good-quality wool. The colour is chosen for its symbolism: green for fertility, for new life, a prayer for the fields and for the womb. It's your finest garment, one you will likely wear for holidays and special occasions for years to come. Your hair is not styled in an intricate updo. It is simply washed and brushed until it shines, left to hang loose down your back. A quirky but common tidbit of the era, the wearing of one's hair down and uncovered was the universal sign of an unmarried maiden. Today is the very last day you will be allowed this simple freedom. From tomorrow, your hair will be braided and hidden away beneath a cap or a wimple, the mark of a married woman. It feels like a small private loss amidst the larger public change. You run your fingers through the ends of your hair one last time, a silent farewell to the girl you were. Then the door to your house swings open and the world rushes in, not as a gentle breeze, but as a wall of sound. This is your wedding procession, and it is anything but a dignified, solemn affair. A pair of musicians hired for the day, a man with a set of screeching pipes and a boy with a frantic-looking drum called a tabor, launch into a tune. The melody is loud, reedy, and slightly out of tune, designed not for beauty but for volume. This is how the village knows the festivities are beginning. You step out into the muddy track that serves as your main street, and the procession forms around you. Your father walks with you, his hand a steadying presence on your arm. Your groom and his family are already there, having made their own noisy journey from their home. He looks as nervous as you feel, his face stiff in the morning chill. He gives you a tight, formal nod. The families begin to merge, a slow, shuffling parade of your relatives and his. Then come the neighbors. Doors open and people spill out, falling into step behind the musicians. Everyone is here. The woman who sells eggs, the blacksmith whose hammer is a constant rhythm in the village, the old man who watches the world from his bench every day. It's less a sacred march and more of a community-wide relocation to the church. Kids, ecstatic about the break in routine, chase each other underfoot, occasionally darting out to throw handfuls of wheat grains at you, a prayer for a plentiful harvest and many children. A joke about how you'd rather they throw bread, since you skipped breakfast, floats into your mind. The walk is short, but it feels like an eternity. You are on display, the central figure in a rustic, meandering spectacle. The music is relentless, the piper's cheeks puffed out, his face a bright red. You have a suspicion he may have started celebrating a little early. His tunes are becoming more creative. The whole experience is a strange mix of the profoundly personal and the utterly public. This is a mainstream European custom stretching from the lowest peasant marriage to the grandest royal affair. A wedding was a public announcement, and the procession was the press release, ensuring the entire community served as witnesses. As you approach the church, a simple stone building with a small bell tower, you see that a crowd is already waiting. But they are not filing inside, they are clustered around the entrance, the ostium ecclesiae, the church door. This is where the real business will take place. The most critical part of your wedding will not happen before the holy altar, but here, on the cold stone steps in the open air. This is the custom of the porch vows. The priest, Father Thomas, emerges holding a book. The music mercifully stops, replaced by an expectant hush from the assembled villagers. The air smells of damp wool, wood smoke, and wet earth. Your father places your hand into your groom's. It feels cool and slightly clammy. The priest begins the rites in the vernacular, in English, not Latin, so that every single person present can hear and understand the contract being made. He asks the final formal question, if anyone knows of any impediment. The silence stretches again, just as it did during the banns. Your heart thumps a heavy rhythm against your ribs. Then you say the words, "I take thee, John, to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward." Your voice is small, but it carries in the quiet. He recites his part, his voice a low rumble. This exchange of consent per verba de presenti, by words of the present tense, is the legal core of the marriage. It is the moment you are legally bound to one another. There is no I will, only I do. It is happening now. He then slides a simple metal ring onto your finger. It feels heavy and foreign. The crowd murmurs its approval. You are now, in the eyes of the law and the community, man and wife. All of this happened before even setting foot in God's house. Only then does the priest turn and lead you inside the church. The great wooden door groans shut behind the wedding party, muffling the sounds of the village and plunging you into a solemn, echoing space. The mood shifts instantly. The air is cold and carries the ancient scent of incense, melted wax, and stone dust. Sunbeams, thick with floating particles, slant down from the high, narrow windows, illuminating the crucifix at the far end. Now comes the spiritual part of the ceremony, the nuptial mass. You and your new husband kneel on the hard stone floor before the altar. The long, droning ritual begins entirely in Latin. You catch a few familiar words, Pater Noster, Ave Maria, but most of it is a hypnotic, incomprehensible river of sound. Your knees begin to ache. Your mind starts to wander. You think about the feast to come, whether your aunt remembered to add enough honey to the cakes. You wonder if the goat is behaving itself. At a key moment in the Mass, the priest blesses a small number of silver coins that your husband holds. This is the RA, or the bride price. He pours the small handful of coins into your cupped hands. They are cool and solid, a sudden weight. He then puts them back in his purse, but the symbolism is complete. You've been paid for. Historians still ponder the exact meaning of this curious transaction. Was it a symbolic remnant of an older Germanic custom where a husband literally bought his wife? Or was it a pledge, a sign that he was now financially responsible for you? Perhaps it was merely a token representing the dowry you brought into the union. To you in this moment it just feels odd. A strangely commercial interruption in a deeply spiritual service. You almost want to ask if this counts towards the price of a new pair of shoes. Finally, after what feels like a lifetime, the priest gives the final blessing. You rise, your legs stiff and tingling. You turn to face the small congregation of your family. You are married, legally, publicly, and now divinely. As you walk back down the aisle and out of the church door, the noise of the village hits you once again. The piper, looking even more flushed than before, strikes up another jaunty, chaotic tune. The sacred part is over. Now the real celebration, with all its earthly messiness, is about to begin. Stepping out of the quiet solemnity of the church is like diving back into a river of chaos. The reedy pipes and thumping drums strike up again, this time with a more celebratory, almost frantic energy. The short, solemn procession from the church to the site of the feast is the second act of your public parade. This time, however, the mood is lighter. People are laughing. Someone hands your husband a leather flask, and he takes a hearty swig before offering it to you. The strong, sweet taste of mead burns a little on its way down, but it sends a welcome warmth through your body. The feast is not being held in a grand hall. For a family of your standing, it's in your father's barn, hastily cleared of tools and livestock. The earthy smell of hay and animals still lingers heavily in the air, a scent you find strangely comforting. Long wooden trestle tables have been set up, covered with linen cloths, not as fine as the ones in your dowry chest, but clean and serviceable. The sheer amount of food laid out is astonishing. In a world where every meal is carefully portioned, a wedding feast is a sanctioned explosion of excess. It's a statement about your family's prosperity and generosity. You and your husband are seated at a slightly raised table at one end of the barn, giving you a commanding view of the proceedings. Before you is a whole roasted pig, its skin crackled and glistening, an apple stuffed in its mouth. There are trenchers, thick slices of day-old bread that serve as edible plates, piled high with stewed meats, fish pies, and mounds of root vegetables cooked with precious honey and herbs. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meat, spices, and a lot of unwashed but very cheerful people packed into a tight space. A very popular mainstream historical fact is the heavy use of spices like clove, nutmeg, and pepper in medieval cooking for the wealthy. It was a status symbol, but also, many suspect, a handy way to disguise the taste of meat that was just a little past its prime. Your venison stew is suspiciously pungent with cloves. It's delicious, but you try not to think too hard about the deer's recent history. The entertainment begins. It's not a string quartet. A juggler, whose real job is shoeing horses from the next village over, starts tossing apples into the air. He drops them more often than he catches them, much to the delight of the children who scramble for the bruised fruit. The piper from the procession has now been joined by a man with a crude, stringed instrument that looks like a lute that lost a fight. Their music is loud and repetitive, a droning backdrop to the roar of conversation and laughter. You find yourself smiling a genuine smile for the first time all day. It's noisy, it's a bit messy, and the entertainment is questionable at best, but there's a real sense of community joy in the air. This feast could go on for hours, even days, depending on your family's resources. You lean back slightly, taking it all in, feeling the mead buzz pleasantly in your veins. As the afternoon wears on and the ale flows freely, a unique and slightly awkward tradition begins. It's called the bride ale. Your mother places a large wooden bucket on the table in front of you, along with a collection of earthenware mugs. This is your personal fundraiser. A quirky, fringe-like tidbit that was actually quite common in parts of Europe, especially England. The bride ale was a way for the bride and her family to recoup some of the frankly staggering costs of the wedding. You have personally brewed this ale, and now it's your job to sell it to your own wedding guests. You start pouring mugs and your new husband calls out, encouraging people to come forward. "A penny a cup for the beautiful bride's ale," he booms. Guests stumble up, dropping coins into a bowl before taking their drink. It feels incredibly strange, like being a tavern keeper at your own party. One old farmer winks and tells you he hopes the ale is stronger than your last batch. You manage a polite laugh. It's transactional, yes, but there's no shame in it. A wedding was a huge financial undertaking, and this was a practical, community-supported solution. Every coin dropped into that bowl is another small weight off your family's shoulders. Historians debate the origins of this custom, with some linking it to older communal festivals and others seeing it as a purely economic invention to help young couples get started. Either way, for the next hour, you are the most popular person in the barn, doling out frothy mugs of your special brew. As evening deepens, the air in the barn grows thicker, hotter, and louder. The torches sputter, casting long, dancing shadows. The mood shifts from festive to bawdy. Jokes get cruder, the laughter louder. And then you see it, a determined group of women, your mother and aunts among them, approaching your table with mischievous glints in their eyes. At the same time, a group of your husband's friends, red-faced and boisterous from the ale, surround him. The moment you've been privately dreading has arrived, the bedding ceremony. There is no concept of a private, romantic wedding night. Your consummation is a public event, a community-sanctioned final act of the wedding day. The women lead you away, out of the barn and back towards your new home, often a room in your father-in-law's house. The men half carry, half shove your husband in the same direction, singing a song with lyrics that make your cheeks burn. It's a riotous, slightly drunken procession, moving through the darkness from the party to the bedroom. They escort you into the nuptial chamber. It's a small room, dominated by the bed that has been assembled from your dowry. The sheets, the fine linen ones from your chest, are turned down. The group of guests, a mix of men and women, cram into the small space, leaving no room for privacy. They help you undress, not with gentleness, but with a kind of rowdy efficiency, passing your clothes around. Your husband is being subjected to the same treatment on the other side of the bed. You're left in your thin linen shift, feeling incredibly exposed. Then with cheers and encouragements, they tuck you both into the bed. The priest might even be present to bless the bed and sprinkle it with holy water, praying for fertility and chasing away any demons that might interfere. It's the final and most bizarre piece of official business. Before they leave, they hand you one last cup of spiced wine or a sack posset, a potent concoction of hot milk curdled with wine or ale, heavily sweetened and spiced. It's supposed to give you strength and encouragement, a sort of medieval energy drink for the task ahead. You drink it down, the warm liquid doing little to calm your nerves. Finally, with a few last lewd jokes and a round of applause, they begin to file out of the room, closing the door behind them. The silence that descends is sudden and profound. The only sound is the faint, muffled echo of the party still raging in the barn. You are alone with your new husband for the very first time. You lie side by side in the darkness, two near strangers in a bed, blessed by a priest and warmed by the well wishes of a very drunk village, about to fulfill the final clause of a contract signed when you were a child. The next morning, light seeps through the single, small, shuttered window of your new room. It's a pale, hazy dawn, and the lingering smell of spiced wine hangs in the air. The sounds from the previous night have faded into a low, rumbling headache. You lie still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar rhythm of a new household waking up. The distant clatter of a pot, the crow of a rooster that sounds different from your father's. Everything is the same, and yet nothing is. Your husband stirs beside you. He props himself up on one elbow and looks at you. It's not a look of romantic tenderness, but one of evaluation, of duty done. He reaches for a small leather pouch on the stool beside the bed. From it he pulls a gift. He places it in your hand. It could be a simple, carved wooden comb. It could be a silver brooch. If his family were particularly well off, it might even be a few coins. This is the Morgengifu, or the morning gift. This is a mainstream and legally recognized Germanic tradition that survived well into the High Middle Ages. It was a payment, plain and simple. It was his personal gift to you, separate from the dowry, as compensation for your virginity and a pledge of his continued support. This gift became your exclusive property. You could sell it, keep it, or bequeath it to your children as you saw fit. It was a measure of his satisfaction and his family's status, and a crucial piece of your newfound financial security. You look at the gift in your palm, a small, intricate bronze pin for your cloak. It's cool and solid, a tangible symbol of the transaction that your entire marriage has been. It's a bit like getting a receipt, a very, very weird receipt. Later that morning, as you both emerge to break your fast, the celebrations resume, albeit in a more subdued fashion. Some of the guests have slept in the barn, while others have stumbled back to their own homes, only to return for more food and ale. The mood is less formal, more relaxed. As you sit with your new in-laws, you suddenly feel a hand dart under the table and grab at your leg. You let out a small yelp of surprise. One of the male guests has dived under the table, intent on capturing your garter. This is not a flirtatious gesture, it's a frantic, competitive sport. The wedding garter was seen as an incredible token of good luck. Possessing a piece of the bride's attire was thought to bring good fortune, and the garter was prime real estate. Soon, other young men, emboldened by the morning's ale, join the fray. It becomes a clumsy, drunken scramble under the feast table. To prevent their new dresses from being torn to shreds by grabby, over-enthusiastic guests, brides often preemptively removed the garter and tossed it into the crowd. This tradition, which seems so playfully modern at bouquet and garter tosses today, had its origins in this chaotic, slightly violent medieval custom. You hastily untie the simple ribbon from your stocking and toss it over your shoulder, where it's immediately pounced upon by 3 young men who wrestle for it in the hay. It's one less thing you have to worry about, but not all post-wedding attention is so light-hearted. As you settle into the rhythm of your new life over the next few days, you become acutely aware of the village's scrutiny. They watched the procession, they heard the vows, they attended the feast. They are collectively the arbiters of your marriage, and if they disapprove, they have a very loud way of showing it. Imagine one evening, a week after the wedding, you are startled by a horrendous noise outside your window. It's not the sound of animals or wind, it's a cacophony of banging metal, shouting, and a kind of tuneless, mocking singing. And this is the charivari, or in England, the rough music. It's a public shaming ritual, a noisy, intimidating serenade performed by the community to show their disapproval of a marriage. Historians have catalogued many reasons for a charivari. Perhaps your husband is a widower who remarried too quickly. Perhaps there's a large age gap between you. Or maybe one of you is from another village, and the locals are feeling particularly xenophobic. The most common reason was a perceived unnatural union that upset the social order. Peeking through a crack in the shutters, you see them, a crowd of your new neighbours, their faces lit by torchlight. They are banging pots and pans, rattling cowbells and blowing on horns. They are performing a kind of folk justice, a demonstration that while the church and the law have sanctioned your union, the court of public opinion has not. It's a deeply unsettling experience, a form of ritualized harassment designed to humiliate you both. The mainstream legal systems rarely intervened in these matters, often viewing them as a way for communities to regulate their own moral codes. You huddle inside, listening to the din, waiting for them to get bored and go home. It's a stark reminder that your marriage is not just your business, it is the whole village's business. There is a quirky and darker tidbit associated with this. Sometimes the charivari involved parading effigies of the offending couple through the streets, mocking them before burning the effigies in a bonfire. It was a form of symbolic violence, a warning that could easily escalate. Scholars continue to debate whether the charivari was a genuine form of social control to enforce morality, or just a good excuse for young men to get drunk, make noise, and cause trouble under the guise of tradition. For you, cowering behind your shuttered window, the academic distinction doesn't much matter. It's just terrifying. Eventually, the noise fades as the crowd moves on, leaving behind a ringing silence and the unsettling knowledge that you are being watched, judged, and, if found wanting, publicly condemned by the very people you must now call your neighbors. Your new life has begun, not with a quiet settling in, but with a harsh and jarring reminder of your place within the tight and often unforgiving weave of the community. Weeks, months, maybe even a few years pass. The rhythm of your married life has settled into a routine. The memory of the noisy procession and the awkward bedding ceremony has softened, becoming just another story to tell. But what if this life, this carefully constructed contract, begins to fray at the edges? What if the union, celebrated so publicly, becomes privately unbearable? Getting out of a medieval marriage was notoriously difficult, but not impossible. The church recognized only one way to truly dissolve a marriage: annulment. An annulment declared that a valid marriage had never existed in the first place, and for that you needed a very good reason. You might start to hear whispers, tales from other villages of marriages undone. Perhaps you'd learn about the most straightforward route, proving a pre-existing contract. If your husband had secretly pledged himself to another woman before marrying you, your marriage could be invalidated. And here we find one of the more surprising legal loopholes of the age: the secret marriage. A mainstream and disruptive historical fact is that according to church law, specifically the principle of consensus facit nuptias, or consent makes the marriage, all that was truly required for a valid marriage was the free exchange of consent between two people of marriageable age. This didn't need to happen in a church or even with a priest present. So picture this: two young lovers in a tavern with no dowry or parental permission. Over a mug of ale, with the barmaid and a friend as witnesses, they declare their vows to each other in the present tense. I take you as my wife, and I take you as my husband. Legally and sacramentally, they were as married as you are. These unions, known as clandestine marriages, were a constant headache for both church and state because they were binding yet almost impossible to prove or disprove, creating chaos in matters of inheritance and legitimacy. If your husband had done this years ago and his old flame suddenly appeared with two witnesses, your entire life and the legal status of your children could be undone in an instant. But perhaps there's no jilted lover in the wings. Perhaps the problem is closer to home. The church laid out several grounds for annulment, such as being too closely related by blood, consanguinity, or even through godparentage, spiritual affinity. But one of the most bizarre and desperate routes was to claim impotence. Not just any impotence, mind you. If your husband was simply unable to consummate the marriage, that was grounds for annulment. But if he was impotent only with you, the cause could be something far more sinister: witchcraft. This is a fringe tidbit that feels like it belongs in a fairy tale, but appears with disturbing regularity in annulment records: maleficium, or impotence caused by a curse. Imagine going before a grim ecclesiastical court. You would have to testify that your husband is a perfectly capable man, but whenever he approaches you, a witch's spell renders him useless. It was a bizarre but strangely logical argument within their worldview. The marriage sacrament included the marital debt, the mutual obligation to be available to one another for the procreation of children. If a curse was preventing the payment of that debt, the marriage contract couldn't be fulfilled. Historians still argue about how genuinely these claims were believed. Were they a sincere reflection of a world saturated with a belief in magic? Or were they a convenient, no-fault excuse, a legal fiction that allowed a couple who simply disliked each other to go their separate ways without one party having to accept the shame and blame of natural impotence? It was the ultimate, "it's not you, it's me," or rather, "the witch who cursed me" defense. Of course, such claims required proof. And this is where the dissolution of a marriage becomes just as public and invasive as its creation. If the grounds were non-consummation, the court had to verify it. This could lead to a truly humiliating physical inspection of both husband and wife by a panel of midwives or court-appointed doctors to search for any physical impediments. But the most crucial piece of evidence could be the bed sheets. Remember those fine linen sheets from your dowry chest? They could be called upon to serve as Exhibit A. The proof of consummation was a deeply rooted custom, lingering from the wedding night itself. After the public bedding ceremony, it was not uncommon for a witness, often the mother of the bride or a trusted family friend, to inspect the sheets the next morning for the bloodstains that proved virginity had been lost and the marriage consummated. This evidence wasn't just for familial peace of mind. It could become a critical piece of public and legal evidence later on. If, years down the line, an annulment was sought based on non-consummation, the absence of this proof from the wedding night could be brought up. You are left with a quiet, lingering image of medieval life. It is a world where the most private, intimate moments of your existence, your betrothal, your vows, your wedding night, and even the potential end of your marriage are all subject to public witness and community review. Your life is an open book, but one that is written, read, and edited by your family, your neighbors, and the church. From the joyous, noisy chaos of the wedding procession to the sinister, banging threat of the charivari, you are never truly alone. You are a thread woven so tightly into the fabric of your community that you can never be fully separated from it, for better or for worse. Lying there now in the quiet of your room, you can feel the weight of all those eyes, all those traditions, all those unwritten rules, and you understand that in this world, marriage is not an ending. Like in a story, it is a beginning, yes, but the beginning of a long public performance that only ends when you do. Weirdest pets you could own in medieval times. Section 1. You must first reimagine the animals you already know. Let's start with the most common, the humble dog and cat. You see them everywhere, but not as you know them. The dog lying by the great hall's hearth is not there simply to have its belly rubbed. He is a tool. He is a furry alarm system, a guardian of the gate, and his name is probably something practical and stern, like Nasher or Stalker. By day, he is your husband's hunting partner, a specialized beast bred for stamina and a strong nose, perhaps a greyhound for coursing deer or a terrier for rooting foxes. At night, he is a living lock, his ears pricking at the slightest unfamiliar sound from beyond the castle walls. You might give him a fond scratch behind the ears, but his primary value is his function. He earns his keep through vigilance, not affection. A pampered pet was often seen as a sign of foolishness or gluttony. Why waste good food on a creature that doesn't work? The same is true for the cat you see, slinking through the shadows of the granary. She is not a pampered lap cat. She is the official mouser to the manor, an essential employee in the constant war against vermin that threaten your winter food stores. A good mousing cat was worth its weight in the grain it protected. A mainstream historical fact from the era is that certain medieval Welsh laws attributed to the 10th century King Hywel laid out the specific value of a cat. A kitten before it could see was worth a penny, one that had caught its first mouse was worth twopence, and a fully trained adult mouser was worth 4p, the same price as a lamb. Her companionship is a welcome but accidental byproduct of her primary role. You see her coiled on a sack of barley, her eyes two green slits in the dim light. She is a silent, furry professional on the payroll, but you are a noble lady, and while practical animals have their place, you have a deep desire for something more. You seek a creature whose sole purpose is to be delightful. As you retreat from the noise and public life of the Great Hall to your private chamber, the solar, you are not alone. Perched delicately on your shoulder is your most prized possession. It is not a jewel nor a fine piece of cloth. It is a squirrel. Yes, a squirrel. You can feel the light, feathery weight of it on your shoulder, its tiny claws gripping the thick wool of your gown just enough to stay secure. It chitters softly, a gentle, inquisitive sound that is just for you. Its name is Pip, and he is a red squirrel, his fur a flash of russet against the deep blue of your dress. Around his neck is a tiny, delicate collar made of silver links attached to a fine chain that you hold loosely in your hand. This is not for cruelty, but for safekeeping. A creature this small and precious could easily be lost in the vast, drafty spaces of a castle. This quirky tidbit, keeping squirrels on elaborate leashes and chains, appears constantly in manuscript illuminations, donor portraits, and literature as a symbol of a lady's gentle and domestic nature. Owning a squirrel signaled that you had the time and the resources to care for something so completely useless. It was a status symbol of leisure. You settle into a high-backed wooden chair near the window, the faint afternoon light illuminating the room. Pip scampers down your arm and onto the table, where a small wooden bowl awaits him. You have prepared his meal yourself. A few shelled hazelnuts and a single, perfectly peeled almond. You watch as he holds a nut in his tiny paws, turning it over and over before nibbling at it with an intense, captivating focus. Caring for such a creature was an art. Manuals offered advice on the proper care and feeding of pet squirrels, detailing the best nuts to give them and how to build them tiny, intricate wooden houses. Historians still argue whether the meticulous care for these animals stemmed from genuine affection or if it was simply another form of courtly performance, a way for a lady to demonstrate her delicacy and refinement. Was Pip a beloved individual, or was he a living accessory like a beautiful brooch? For you, as you watch him twitch his nose, the line is wonderfully blurry. He is both. You laugh quietly as he, having finished his nut, tries to bury the last one in the folds of your sleeve for later, a small instinctive act that feels like a shared secret. The soft sounds of Pip's nibbling are not the only delicate noises in your chamber. From the corner of the room comes a thread of sweet, liquid music. It is the song of your finches. Hanging from a wrought iron hook near the window is an ornate cage, not made of wire, but painstakingly crafted from wood or even wicker. Inside, two tiny birds, a goldfinch and a linnet, hop from perch to perch. Their feathers are flashes of brilliant colour. The goldfinch with his shocking red face and bright yellow wing bars, the linnet a more subdued, gentle brown. They are your private orchestra. In a world without recorded music, any melody was a precious thing. The raucous songs of the tavern and the solemn chants of the chapel had their place, but here, in your solar, this was music just for you. The finch's trilling, bubbling song fills the quiet space, a constant, cheerful counterpoint to the sighing of the wind outside. Their capture and keeping was a significant hobby. Bird trappers were skilled professionals who used elaborate traps and nets to catch desirable songbirds, which were then sold at market. You might have even received these as a courtly gift from an admirer. Keeping them alive was a challenge. You provide them with fresh water daily and a special mixture of seeds you buy from a merchant in the town. You've even placed a small piece of cuttlebone in the cage for them to sharpen their beaks on, a tip you learned from another lady at court. For a little extra excitement, you might release them to fly around the solar for an hour, making sure the shutters are closed first. Recapturing them is always a fun, if slightly frantic, challenge. Just last week you nearly had to get a servant to climb on a stool to retrieve the linnet from the top of a tapestry. It's moments like these, surrounded by your small, carefully curated collection of gentle creatures, that the huge, cold castle feels most like a home. The working world of dogs and cats can have the run of the castle. This room, with its birdsong and its nutty secrets, belongs entirely to you. The gentle trilling of your finches is interrupted by a soft knock on the chamber door. A servant enters with a message. A visiting merchant has arrived with a bolt of silk he wishes to show you, and he awaits you in the small courtyard garden. You sigh, the peaceful spell broken. Carefully, you coax Pip, your squirrel, off your shoulder and into his small wooden house, fastening the little latch. You leave the birds to their song and follow the servant out of the solar down a winding stone staircase. The air grows cooler as you descend, and the muted sounds of the castle's daily life begin to filter in. The distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the drone of voices from the kitchen. You step out into the garden, a small, high-walled enclosure that offers a respite from the wind. Herbs and roses grow in carefully tended beds, and it is here that you greet your most spectacular, most valuable, and most demanding avian pet. Perched on a heavy, ornate stand of dark wood is a creature of impossible colors. It is a parrot. His body is a brilliant, shocking green, the color of new leaves in the spring. He has a splash of bright red on his head, like a tiny, jaunty cap, and wings tipped with yellow and blue. He is a living jewel, a piece of a world so distant you can barely imagine it. You know he came from Africa, a place spoken of in hushed, fantastical tones, a land of endless sun and strange beasts. His journey to your castle was an epic in itself, a long and perilous voyage by sea and then overland, passed from merchant to merchant, his value increasing with every mile. To own a parrot in medieval Europe is the ultimate declaration of wealth and connection. A mainstream fact of the period is that these birds, alongside spices and silks, were key luxury imports, sometimes exchanged as diplomatic gifts between monarchs. Your husband paid a price for this bird that could have bought a small farm. As you approach, the parrot cocks his head, his black, intelligent eyes watching you. "Good day, my lady," he squawks. His voice is a harsh, gravelly imitation of your own, but the words are clear enough. The merchant, who is unrolling his silks nearby, flinches slightly. He's never quite gotten used to it. The ability of parrots to mimic human speech was seen as anything from a charming novelty to a minor miracle, or even something faintly unnatural. Your parrot, named Zaid, knows a handful of phrases. He can say your name, laugh on command, a cackle that sounds more like a goblin than a bird, and occasionally shouts, "More wine," a phrase he undoubtedly picked up from overhearing your husband at supper. His limited but brutally honest vocabulary is a constant source of amusement. You offer him a piece of fig, which he takes delicately in his strong grey claw. He is a creature of warmth and sun, and keeping him alive through a damp, draughty English winter is a constant worry. He has his own brazier that must be kept lit on cold nights, and his diet is a complex affair of fruits and nuts that cost a small fortune to procure. He is, by a wide margin, the most high-maintenance living thing in the castle, yourself included. But as he nibbles the fig, making small, happy, clicking sounds, you feel it is worth it. He is a piece of the exotic, a flash of impossible colour in your grey stone world. Your business with the merchant concludes, and as you walk along the outer wall of the garden, your senses are assaulted by the next level of your avian menagerie. A screeching alien cry echoes through the air, a sound somewhere between a rusty gate hinge and a distressed cat. This is the call of your peacocks. Several of them strut across the main lawn of the castle's bailey. They are undeniably beautiful. Their necks are shimmering iridescent blue, their heads adorned with a crest of delicate feathers like a tiny, perfect crown. One of the males, catching the light, fans his tail. It rises into a magnificent, quivering display of over 100 eyes. shimmering in shades of gold, green, and bronze. It is a breathtaking spectacle, a gaudy and ostentatious display of beauty. And that is their only purpose. Peacocks are the medieval equivalent of a ridiculously expensive lawn ornament. They wander, they screech, and they look magnificent. They serve no practical function other than to be seen by any visitor or passerby. Silently screaming, the people who live here are very, very rich. However, they do have one other, rather quirky, secondary purpose. You look at the magnificent male displaying his tail and cannot help but think of the feast last Easter. One of his brethren was the centerpiece. The bird had been carefully skinned, roasted, and then painstakingly redressed in its own dazzling feathers to be presented at the high table. It's a slightly morbid thought, admiring the beauty of a creature while also mentally noting it would look even better on a platter. It's a very medieval way of thinking. Beauty and utility, even in the most bizarre combination, are never far apart. But even the peacocks are not the final word in aristocratic pet keeping. For that, you must enter the great hall, the very heart of the castle. In a quiet corner, away from the main thoroughfare where servants hurry with trays and dogs sleep by the fire, you see them. Stalking with an impossible, slow-motion grace are your pet cranes. These are not small birds. They stand tall, almost as high as your waist, on legs as thin as reeds. Their plumage is a subtle, elegant grey, and their movements are deliberate and serene. To have wading birds like cranes or herons as indoor pets was perhaps the most extreme form of luxury. It bespoke a level of wealth so profound that you could afford to house and feed large, wild, fish-eating birds for no reason other than their aesthetic appeal. It was a statement of your complete and total dominion over the natural world. These are not creatures of the house, they are creatures of the marsh and the riverbank, brought inside to become living art. You watch as one of them dips its long beak into a shallow stone basin of water left out for them, its movements silent and hypnotic. Historians still debate the reality of these companions. Were they truly tamed and domesticated, forming a bond with their owners? Or were they simply captive, wild birds with clipped wings resigned to a strange life, pacing on stone floors instead of muddy shores? Their silent, watchful presence adds a surreal, almost dreamlike quality to the hall. The squawking of Zaid the parrot is a marvel. The beauty of the peacocks is a spectacle, but the silent, stalking grace of the cranes feels like a secret, a piece of living poetry in the middle of your bustling, noisy castle. A sudden crash from the far side of the great hall shatters the serene atmosphere created by your stalking cranes. The sound is a familiar one, a metallic clatter followed by a high-pitched, triumphant shriek. You sigh, a faint smile playing on your lips. You know exactly what has happened. A scullery maid, hurrying through the hall with a tray of pewter goblets, has been ambushed. You walk towards the sound, and sure enough, you see the maid on her hands and knees, gathering the scattered goblets. And there, perched gleefully atop a carved wooden screen near the fireplace, is the culprit. It's Nico, your pet monkey. He is a Barbary macaque, a small, tailless primate brought back from North Africa or Gibraltar. He is dressed, as always, in a tiny, custom-made coat of red velvet, complete with silver buttons. It does little to dignify him. In fact, it only serves to highlight his inherent chaos. Right now, he is gleefully clutching a polished pewter cup, holding it to his mouth as if he is toasting his own successful heist. He chatters excitedly, his dark, intelligent eyes glinting with mischief. Owning a monkey was a significant step up in the world of exotic pet ownership, a tier above even the talking parrot. They were incredibly expensive, difficult to transport, and notoriously troublesome. Their very presence was a testament to your family's immense wealth and daring. They were creatures of pure entertainment, living court jesters whose antics could lighten the long, dark winter days. A mainstream historical fact is that monkeys feature prominently in the margins of medieval illuminated manuscripts, the marginalia, where they are often depicted mimicking human behavior in a satirical way. You see them dressed as knights, playing musical instruments, or quite often causing trouble just like Nico. Nico's primary job is to be amusing, a task he excels at, though often at the expense of your household's order. He is a master of petty theft with a particular fondness for shiny objects and small pieces of fruit. He can untie knots, unlatch doors, and has a deep-seated rivalry with the castle's greyhounds, often tormenting them from a safe height. Just last week, he managed to get a hold of a priest's sermon notes during a visit and scampered up into the rafters of the hall, tearing off small pieces and letting them drift down like confetti during the evening meal. While the priest was not amused, your husband laughed so hard he choked on his wine. You approach him now, holding out a piece of apple. "Nico, drop it," you say, your voice firm but fond. He chatters again, weighing his options. He looks at the goblet, then at the apple. Finally, with a sigh of pure primate drama, he lets the goblet clatter to the floor and scampers down the screen onto your outstretched arm, immediately grabbing the fruit. As he settles on your shoulder, stuffing his cheeks with apple, you feel his small, wiry body, a bundle of chaotic energy that brings a spark of unpredictable life to your very structured world. Your attention, however, is drawn to a much quieter, less conspicuous creature. Tucked away near the hearth, almost invisible in the gloom, is a shallow wooden crate filled with straw. From it, a small, twitching black nose emerges, followed by a spiny body. This is your household hedgehog. This pet falls into a curious category. An animal kept for a purpose, rooted almost entirely in folklore. You are keeping it because of a quirky but widely believed myth, recorded in bestiaries and passed down through generations, that hedgehogs are useful for harvesting fruit. The belief was that a hedgehog would go to an orchard, roll over on fallen apples or grapes, impale them on its spines, and then trot home with its spiky bounty. It is, of course, completely untrue, but the belief was so pervasive that people genuinely kept them for this purpose. You've had this one for months, and so far it has shown no inclination to do anything other than sleep, eat the bowl of milk you leave out for it, and occasionally startle an unsuspecting guest with its sudden appearance from under a tapestry. Its presence is more of a hopeful experiment than a practical asset. Still, you find its quiet, shuffling presence rather charming. It is a humble and unassuming creature compared to the gaudy peacocks and the chaotic monkey, a small piece of the wild forest floor brought into your stone hall. Its name is Spiky. You aren't very creative when you're feeling practical. Historians still debate the full extent of this belief. Was it a genuine, widely held folk theory, or was it more of a charming story people told, with few actually expecting their pet hedgehog to turn into a self-propelled fruit basket? Either way, the little creature in the box is a living piece of folklore, a testament to a time when the natural world was still full of strange magic and misunderstood behaviors. But there is one more unusual pet in this bustling hall, one that bridges the gap between folklore and deadly practicality. You notice a flicker of movement near the kitchens, a sinuous, lightning-fast shape that streaks across the floor and disappears into the shadows. It is not a cat nor a weasel. It is your family's mongoose. This creature, a native of warmer climates in Asia and Africa, was sometimes imported at great expense for a single, crucial reason. It was a legendary killer of snakes. While England is not exactly a hotbed of venomous serpents, vipers like the adder were a genuine threat, especially in rural, rustic environments. A mongoose was the ultimate biological security system. Stories of their prowess, their incredible speed, and their supposed immunity to snake venom were famous, traveling along the same trade routes that brought spices and silk. Your husband acquired this one from a Genoese merchant who swore it had saved his entire crew from a nest of vipers they had accidentally disturbed on a stop in the Levant. It lives a semi-wild existence within the castle walls, its primary diet being the mice and rats the cats might miss, but its true purpose is preventative. Its quick, slinking presence is a comfort, a furry bodyguard against a slithering threat you hope you will never have to face. Watching the three of them, the chaotic monkey, the mythical hedgehog, and the lethal mongoose, all existing within the same space, is a strange living tableau of your world, a place where pets can be jokes, legends, and lifesavers all at the same time. The afternoon is fading and a thin, watery sunlight filters through the high windows of the hall. The time for indoor amusements is ending. Your husband strides into the hall, pulling on thick leather gloves. He is going hunting, but not for deer with the greyhounds. Today is for rabbits, a vital source of meat for the castle kitchens, and for that he needs a very different kind of animal companion. You watch as he reaches into a special pouch at his belt and pulls out a creature that looks like a long, liquid thread of muscle and fur. It is his prize ferret. The ferret uncoils in his hands, yawning to reveal a set of tiny, needle-sharp teeth. Its fur is pale, the color of cream, and its eyes are like two bright pink beads. It looks around, its body moving with a fluid, boneless grace constantly in motion. This creature is not a pet in the affectionate sense. It is a highly trained and indispensable hunting tool. Keeping ferrets for the purpose of hunting, a practice known as ferret legging, no wait, that's something else entirely. A practice known as ferreting is a mainstream historical fact that dates back to at least Roman times. Their long, slender bodies and tenacious nature make them perfectly designed to do one thing: dive into the intricate warren of a rabbit colony and flush the rabbits out into the nets or into the sights of waiting archers. Your husband speaks to the ferret in a low, encouraging voice. It seems to listen, its nose twitching, taking in all the smells of the great hall. He tucks it gently back into its warm, dark pouch, where it will wait until they reach the warrens on the edge of the estate. While some nobles might have viewed ferrets purely as working animals, many handlers formed a close, practical bond with them. You've seen your husband spend hours meticulously cleaning the ferret's enclosure and carefully feeding it the best scraps from the kitchen. It is a partnership, born of necessity and mutual reliance. The ferret depends on him for food and shelter, and the castle kitchens depend on the ferret for a steady supply of fresh meat. It's a relationship far more practical than your own with Nico the monkey, but in its own way, just as significant. As you watch your husband leave with his ferreting party, you think about the grander hunts, the ones reserved for the highest echelons of society. You recall a visit to the king's court last year. There, you witnessed a form of hunting so exotic, so breathtakingly opulent, it made even your parrot look like a common sparrow. The king, in a display of his immense power and global reach, hunted with cheetahs. Imagine standing on a low hill, the grass crisp with morning frost. The king and his royal entourage are there, but there are no baying hounds, no noisy beaters. The air is quiet, filled with a tense anticipation. Then you see them. Led by handlers dressed in fine livery, are two of the most elegant creatures you have ever seen. They are cheetahs with sleek spotted coats and long, graceful limbs. They sit calmly, hoods made of soft leather covering their eyes to keep them from getting distracted. These are not just wild animals, they are highly trained, semi-domesticated hunting companions, a quirky but well-documented passion for certain powerful medieval rulers, most notably the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. He was obsessed with falconry and the science of the hunt, and he wrote about using cheetahs, which he acquired through his connections in the East, to course swift prey like gazelles and hare. The handlers remove the hoods, the cheetahs' heads come up, their sharp eyes scanning the plains below. When they spot their quarry, they do not bark or roar. They become utterly still, their bodies coiled with potential energy. At a silent signal, they are released, and then they move. It's not running, it's an explosion of speed, a flowing, golden blur that seems to devour the ground. It is over in seconds. The sheer, silent swiftness of it is unlike anything you have ever witnessed. It is a display not just of hunting prowess, but of absolute power. To own such an animal was to demonstrate that your reach extended to the furthest, most fabled corners of the world, that you could command not just men and armies, but the very embodiment of wild speed itself. But even a cheetah is not the ultimate expression of royal power through the animal kingdom. The ultimate symbol is not one of grace or speed, but of sheer, brutal strength. The king keeps bears. They are not hunting companions, they are not pets. They are living emblems of his authority. In a specially constructed enclosure within the royal castle, the menagerie, lived two enormous brown bears, gifts from a nervous duke in the Northern Territories. Their enclosure is a deep pit with high stone walls, and people will gather to watch them from a safe distance as they pace and swing their massive heads. These bears serve no practical function at all. They are immensely expensive to feed and incredibly dangerous to maintain. But that is the point. To own bears is to show that you have resources so vast you can afford to maintain a completely useless and deadly spectacle. Their existence is a constant, quiet threat. They are a physical manifestation of the king's untamable power and his ferocious temper. You've heard stories that the king once had a disloyal courtier thrown into the bear pit, though you suspect that's just a grim rumor to keep everyone in line. Historians still argue about the true purpose of these royal menageries. Were they early, disorganized zoos born of a genuine curiosity about the natural world? Or were they political tools, a way for monarchs to project an image of fearsome power and dominion over both their subjects and nature itself? Seeing the huge, hulking shape of the bear in its pit, its deep grunts echoing off the stone, you tend to lean towards the latter. It is the animal as an instrument of psychological warfare. From the tiny ferret in a pouch to the terrifying bear in a pit, animals in your world clearly mark one's station in life. The days grow shorter and the evenings are long and deep. You sit in your solar, the only light coming from a crackling fire in the hearth. The castle is quiet. Your squirrel, Pip, is asleep in his wooden house. Nico the monkey, finally tired from a day of mischief, is curled up in a basket by the fire. It is in these quiet, shadowy hours that your thoughts sometimes turn to the stranger side of pet keeping, to the creatures that exist on the blurry line between companion and omen, between the natural and the supernatural. Your thoughts drift to the castle kitchens. There's a kitchen boy there, a gangly youth named Will, who has a peculiar friend. He has tamed a magpie. It is a stunning bird, its plumage a sharp contrast of deep, glossy black and brilliant white, its long tail shimmering with an iridescent sheen of green and blue. The boy has taught it to speak, much like your parrot, but its mimicry is different. Where Zaid the parrot has a harsh, foreign squawk, the magpie's voice is a strange, liquid gargle that is an uncanny imitation of the human voice. It can say, "Good morning," and can perfectly replicate the cook's sharp whistle for attention. It is a clever, captivating creature, and you have seen Will share his crust of bread with it, the bird perched on his shoulder as if it belonged there. But there is a thread of unease that follows this particular pet. Crows, ravens and magpies, the corvids, are viewed with a deep and ancient suspicion. Their intelligence makes them seem unnatural, and their dark feathers and carrion-eating habits associate them with death, battlefields and dark magic. While the kitchen boy sees a friend, some of the older servants see a bad omen. They make a small sign against evil when the bird flies too close. Is it just a clever bird, or is it something more? This a mainstream folk belief that permeated society from top to bottom. Even kings might be wary of a crow's caw at an inopportune moment. The magpie represents an animal that can never be fully domesticated, one that always keeps a foot in the world of wildness and unsettling superstition. This thread of superstition leads you to think of someone on the very fringes of your society. At the edge of the village that huddles outside the castle walls lives an old woman. She lives alone, her back stooped with age, and she supports herself by selling herbal remedies and bits of folk wisdom. She has a companion. It is not a dog or a cat. It is a large, placid toad that she keeps in a damp crock near her hearth. It has a name, Grumple. The old woman claims it keeps the flies away, but everyone knows it is more than that. This is the spectre of the witch's familiar. In the rising tide of fear and superstition, a simple, lonely pet belonging to a poor, elderly woman could be twisted into something sinister. A quiet toad like Grumple, or a solitary black cat, could be seen not as a pet, but as a demonic agent in disguise, a spirit sent by the devil to help its master perform malevolent magic. A quirky but terrifying fringe belief was that the witch would nourish her familiar, not with milk or flies, but with her own blood, suckled from a witch's mark on her skin. Should the village crops fail, or a child fall ill with a fever, fearful eyes would turn to the old woman and her silent, warty companion. The line between a pet and a familiar was terrifyingly thin, often depending more on the owner's social standing than on the animal itself. Your pet monkey, Nico, is an expensive eccentricity. Her pet toad, Grumple, is potential evidence of a pact with Satan. It is a stark reminder of how precarious life can be, where even the simple comfort of a quiet companion could be used to condemn you. Historians still argue intensely over the origins and reality of the witch trials and the concept of the familiar. Were these beliefs driven from the top down by inquisitors and church doctrine, or did they bubble up from the bottom from the ingrained folk superstitions and social tensions of village life? Standing in your grand solar, you are insulated from such fears, and yet you know this dark undercurrent is as real a part of your world as the stone of the castle walls. This train of thought leads you to one final, and perhaps the most bizarre, example of pet ownership you can imagine. It is not a bird, nor a mammal, nor a demon in disguise. It is a person. You have heard that the Earl of a neighbouring territory, a man known for his eccentricities and vast wealth, has recently acquired a pet hermit. The idea is breathtakingly odd. The Earl has constructed a small, rustic hermitage in a remote corner of his estate, a grotto built of rough stones and twisted roots overlooking a waterfall. He then advertised for a man who would be willing to live in this grotto for a term of 7 years. The contract was very specific. The man was not allowed to cut his hair, his beard, or his nails. He was forbidden to speak to anyone, and he had to dress in a simple, druid-like robe. In exchange for living this life as a silent, contemplative garden ornament, he would receive a handsome pension at the end of his term. This is not a wild fantasy. The phenomenon of the ornamental hermit was a genuine, if rare, aristocratic fad, appearing more prominently in the 17th and 18th centuries, but with its roots in a medieval reverence for asceticism and contemplative life. The Earl doesn't interact with his hermit, he simply enjoys knowing that he is there. He might take his guests on a walk through the woods and point to the wild, bearded figure sitting silently on a rock. The hermit is a living symbol of piety, contemplation, and melancholy, qualities the Earl wishes to associate with his own persona. He is the ultimate status symbol, a human being kept as a philosophical pet. You try to imagine it. The silence, the loneliness, the sheer, crushing boredom of being a living decoration. Compared to that, a mischievous monkey and a squawking parrot seem like perfectly normal companions. Your world is indeed a strange one, a place where an animal can be a tool, a friend, a status symbol, or a demon, and where a man can be a piece of lawn art. You poke the fire, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney, and settle back in your chair, content for now with your own, slightly less complicated menagerie. How medieval people really hated mirrors, and possibly feared them. You exist in a world that is profoundly outward-looking because it has no other choice. Your sense of self is not built upon a steady, daily visual confirmation of who you are. Instead, it is pieced together from fragments from the words and reactions of others. Your mother tells you that you have your father's eyes. Your sister says your hair is the color of wet straw. A passing stranger in the market comments on a smudge of dirt on your cheek. These verbal reflections are your primary source of information. You have no clear, objective image to confirm or deny their reports. You simply have to trust them. How do you arrange your hair or fasten the clasp of your cloak? You do it by feel. Years of repetitive motion have taught your fingers the familiar landscape of your own head, the curve of your jaw, the nape of your neck. It is a form of knowing that is tactile, not visual. Your identity is a feeling, a reputation, a name, not a face that you study each morning. In a strange way, there is a kind of freedom in this. You are unburdened by the constant, nagging self-consciousness that a mirror provides. You do not worry about a stray hair or a slight blemish because you are often blissfully unaware of it. You might spend an entire day with a leaf stuck in your hair, and you wouldn't be embarrassed because you would never know. The entire concept of vanity seems a bit abstract when you can't even get a good look at the thing you're supposed to be vain about. But of course, curiosity is a powerful human trait. You crave a glimpse, and for that, you turn to the oldest mirror known to humankind, water. On a still, windless day, you might go to the well in the courtyard. You ask the person drawing water to wait a moment to let the surface calm. You lean over the stone lip, your body blocking the sun, and you peer down into the dark circle of the water's surface. And there you see it, a face, looking up at you from the depths. It is dark, featureless and upside down. It ripples and shimmers with the slightest tremor. It is you, but a watery, unstable version of you. A ghost. You can make out the general shape of your head, the dark patches of your eyes and mouth, but the details are lost in the liquid gloom. You might smile and see the water person smile back, a warped gesture that breaks the surface into 1,000 pieces before slowly reforming. It's an unnerving experience. It feels less like seeing yourself and more like disturbing a spirit that lives in the well. This is the mirror of Narcissus, and the ancient warning about falling in love with such an image makes a different kind of sense here. It isn't just about vanity, it's about being captivated by something that isn't truly real, a fleeting, deceptive shadow. Your other option is a puddle after a rain, which offers a slightly different, if not better, experience. The image is shallow, right side up, but it is tinted with the brown of the mud beneath. Your face is an earthy, shifting mask, a passing cart, a child splashing through the street, a sudden breeze, and your face is gone, erased. These natural mirrors are unreliable, frustrating, and offer no true sense of recognition. They give you a shape, but not a self. Then one day, you encounter something new. You are in the home of a wealthy merchant, a man who trades in metals and fine goods. In his wife's private chamber, you see it. It is not large, no bigger than the palm of your hand. It is a disc of dark, heavy metal held in a carved ivory frame. This is a man-made mirror. This is technology. A mainstream historical fact of the ancient and medieval world is that before glass mirrors became common, the best reflective surfaces were made from meticulously polished metals like bronze, silver, or a special, highly reflective alloy of tin and copper called speculum metal. These were luxury items, symbols of incredible wealth. The merchant's wife, seeing your curiosity, picks it up. It has a heft to it, a satisfying weight. She hands it to you. The surface is not perfectly clear and bright like a pool of water. It is dark, with a burnished, coppery or greyish hue. She tells you that you must angle it just so to catch the light from the window. You turn the disc in your hands, and for a moment you see only a dark blur. Then you find the right angle, and a face emerges from the metallic depths. It is your face. But it's a version of you from a world with a different sun. The colours are muted, your skin a uniform brownish tint, your eyes dark pools with no discernible colour. The reflection is soft-focused, smoothing over the blemishes and imperfections you know by touch are there. It's the original photo filter, I suppose. You have to hold it very still. The slightest tremor of your hand makes your features swim and warp. This is your first meeting with your own image, and it's a strange, somber introduction. You see a shape that is familiar, but the person in the mirror seems sadder, more serious than you feel. The merchant's wife keeps a small piece of soft deerskin beside the mirror, and she explains that the mirror must be polished every day, otherwise it will tarnish and your reflection will disappear completely. This quirky but necessary tidbit highlights the high-maintenance nature of early vanity. The act of seeing yourself requires constant labor. You must work to keep your image from fading back into the darkness. Historians still argue whether the primary function of these early, precious metal mirrors was for personal grooming, or if they were predominantly status symbols, their reflective quality almost secondary to their value as rare objects. To own a disc of polished silver was to own a piece of treasure, and the fact that it could show you a dim version of your own face was a magical, almost mystical bonus. The merchant's wife likely doesn't use it to apply cosmetics, which were often frowned upon, but to check that her veil is straight, her hair neatly tucked away. It is a tool for ensuring social conformity, not for celebrating individual beauty. You hand the mirror back to her, the dim image of your face dissolving as you move. You have seen yourself, but you have not truly recognized yourself. The face in the metal is a stranger, a silent, somber twin who lives in a dark, polished world. And as you leave the merchant's house, you feel no closer to knowing what you look like, only more aware of the strange and unsettling gap between who you are and what you appear to be. Years pass, the memory of the merchant's metal mirror remains a singular, strange experience. The world continues on, largely unreflected. You still rely on the touch of your own hands and the comments of others to understand your appearance. But technology, even in this slow-moving world, marches forward. Whispers from trade routes and traveling fairs speak of a new kind of looking glass, one made not from heavy, dark metal, but from the seemingly magical substance of glass. One day, your husband returns from a trip to a major city, bringing with him a gift. It is wrapped carefully in a swath of undyed wool. He presents it to you with a proud flourish, knowing it is a thing of great novelty and expense. You unwrap it carefully. It is a mirror, but unlike the metal disc you once held, this one is made of glass, but it is not the flat, perfectly clear pane you might imagine. It is a small, round object, no larger than a dinner plate. The glass itself is thick and greenish, full of tiny bubbles and imperfections. The surface is not flat but distinctly convex, bulging outwards like the bottom of a bottle. A mainstream historical fact is that early glass mirrors, developed in Europe around the 12th and 13th centuries, were made by blowing a glass sphere, pouring molten lead or tin inside to create a reflective layer, and then cutting out small, round sections. This process inevitably resulted in a curved, distorting surface. You hold it up. The reflection that greets you is startling. The convex surface gathers the whole room into its orb, shrinking your solar down into a tiny, curved diorama. It is a fisheye lens. And in the center of this strange, warped world is your face. Or rather, a caricature of your face. Your nose is enormous. Your forehead and chin recede into the distance, and your eyes are stretched wide apart. You turn your head slightly, and your features swirl and bend as if made of water. It is not just a dim reflection, it is a funhouse mirror. It is bizarre. It's almost insulting. You can't help but laugh, a sudden, sharp sound in the quiet room. Is this what you look like, this comical, misshapen goblin? The mirror is a source of endless fascination and frustration. It is brighter than the metal disc, the colors truer, but the image is a grotesque joke. It is almost useless for practical grooming. Trying to judge the symmetry of your headdress in it is a lesson in futility. Its main function, you quickly realize, is novelty. It is a conversation piece, an object of wonder to show to visitors who will shriek with laughter at their own distorted reflections. You hang it on the wall, and it becomes a strange, all-seeing eye, a tiny, polished bubble that contains a miniature, twisted version of your world. But with this new technology, no matter how flawed, comes a new anxiety. The church, ever watchful of the moral temperature of its flock, has opinions about these newfangled looking glasses. The local priest, during his Sunday sermon, might rail against the sin of superbia, or pride. He warns that the devil's favorite trick is to trap souls through vanity. He speaks of foolish women, it is always women, you note, who spend hours gazing at their own flawed reflections, preening and decorating their mortal bodies while their immortal souls wither from neglect. This is a mainstream and persistent theme in medieval morality. The mirror becomes a powerful symbol for vanity, worldliness, and a dangerous self-obsession. To gaze into it for too long is to become entranced with the physical world, forgetting the more important business of heaven and salvation. You think of your new, ridiculous mirror. The idea of becoming sinfully proud while looking at that stretched-out, bulbous-nosed caricature of your face seems unlikely. You'd have to have an exceptionally high opinion of yourself to begin with. And yet, the priest's words plant a seed of unease. You find yourself glancing at the mirror for shorter periods, a faint sense of guilt prickling at you each time you meet the eyes of your own distorted reflection. Is this simple curiosity, or is it the first step on the path to damnation? This moral anxiety soon curdles into a deeper, more primal fear. It's a quirky tidbit of theological and folk belief that mirrors weren't just morally dangerous, they were supernaturally perilous. The distorted image wasn't just a trick of the curved glass. What if it was a window? What if, when you stared into its glassy depths, something was staring back? Whispers and folktales circulate about the true nature of mirrors. They are said to be a kind of portal, a shimmering veil between your world and another one. A demon, it is said, could attach itself to a looking glass. It could peer out at you, learning your secrets, cataloguing your vanities and your fears. Worse, some tales claim that a powerful sorcerer, or a particularly careless owner, could accidentally allow a demon to slip through the mirror and into the world. Suddenly, your comical funhouse mirror doesn't seem so funny anymore. You find yourself covering it with a cloth at night. You don't want that strange, curved eye watching you as you sleep. The idea that a demon might be trapped inside, looking out at your room, turning your own private space into its personal theatre, is deeply unsettling. You recall the ancient stories about water spirits that could drag you down into their world. This feels like the same principle, but now it's an object you have willingly brought into your home. Historians still debate the origins of this demonic association. Does it stem from older pre-Christian beliefs about soul-stealing reflections in water? Or is it a natural evolution of the Church's moral warnings against vanity? If the mirror is an instrument of pride, the devil's favorite sin, then it stands to reason the devil himself would have a close relationship with it. For you, the academic distinction is meaningless, the fear is real. Your beautiful, expensive and novel possession has become a source of anxiety. It hangs on your wall, a silent, bulging eye, and you are no longer sure if you are the one doing the looking or if you are the one being watched. Your world, once so securely unreflected, now has a tiny, distorting and possibly demonic window in it. The fear of your little convex mirror, the one that may or may not be a portal for low-level demons, begins to subside into a low-grade background anxiety. You learn to live with it, as you learn to live with the drafts in the castle and the questionable quality of the winter ale. Your relationship with mirrors becomes more complex, shaped not just by folk tales, but by the high-minded ideas circulating in the world of art and literature. You begin to understand that a mirror doesn't always mean a literal looking glass. You are a literate noblewoman, a rarity, and you spend some of your quiet afternoons reading manuscripts borrowed from a local monastery. One of the books your husband procures for you has a fascinating title, Speculum Principum, or The Mirror of Princes. You unroll the heavy parchment scroll, its edges worn smooth with use. You are expecting perhaps a story about a magical mirror, but you quickly realize there is no glass, no metal, no reflection at all in this text. A mirror, in this context, is a metaphor. The book is a guide for good governance, a collection of moral tales, historical examples, and virtuous advice designed to show a prince or ruler how he ought to behave. The text is the mirror, and by reading it, the prince is meant to see a reflection of his own soul, his own conduct, and measure it against the ideal image of a perfect Christian ruler. This is a mainstream and incredibly popular genre of political writing throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. There were mirrors for princes, mirrors for wives, mirrors for all sorts of people. It's a way of thinking about self-reflection that has nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with one's moral and spiritual character. This metaphorical mirror is seen as a virtuous tool. It does not show you the vanity of your face, but the state of your soul. This feels like a much safer, more productive form of reflection. You're not going to contract a case of demonic possession from reading a book. Probably. You find the idea comforting. The true mirror is an inward-looking one, a mirror for the soul, and its purpose is to guide you toward being a better person, not just a prettier one. Yet just as you get comfortable with this noble idea, you are confronted again with the mirror as a symbol of vice. Your husband commissions a new tapestry for the Great Hall, a massive, vibrant work of art woven by skilled artisans over many months. When it is finally unfurled and hung, you stand back to admire it. It depicts a lush, allegorical garden scene. On one side, chaste ladies are shown reading and praying. On the other side is a depiction of a less virtuous path. And there, sitting under a tree, is a beautiful woman, her hair unbound, her dress slightly too ostentatious. In her hand, she holds a small, round mirror, and she gazes into it with a look of rapt self-admiration. This is luxuria, the sin of lust, or sometimes she is superbia, the sin of pride. You see this image repeated everywhere in the art of your time, in paintings, in carvings, on decorated caskets. A woman holding a mirror is almost never just a woman holding a mirror. She is a symbol, a cautionary tale. The mirror is her defining attribute, a visual shorthand for her sinful nature. It's a classic case of medieval branding. The quirky tidbit here is the level of detail artists would sometimes add. Often, a small demon is depicted hovering behind the woman, either holding the mirror for her or whispering temptations into her ear. It is a powerful, inescapable visual message. This object is linked to female vanity and by extension to sexual temptation and moral corruption. You look at the woman in the tapestry and then you think of your own little mirror covered with a cloth upstairs. The association is so strong, so pervasive, that it almost feels like owning a mirror is a tacit admission of a character flaw. This leads you to the darkest and most forbidden use of a reflective surface: scrying, divination, the attempt to see the future or communicate with spirits. While the Church condemns it as sorcery of the highest order, the desire for forbidden knowledge is a powerful lure. The tool for this practice is not your common glass or metal mirror. A sorcerer would use a shoe stone, often a surface that didn't reflect a clear image, but rather held a deep, dark light. This could be a bowl of water, a piece of polished jet, or, most famously, a mirror made from obsidian. Obsidian, or volcanic glass, when polished, creates a surface like a pool of black ink. It doesn't show you your face. Staring into its dark, glossy depths is said to induce a trance-like state, to open the mind to visions. You've heard whispers about a scholar, a man of dubious reputation in a nearby city, who possesses such a stone. People say he can tell you if your lost livestock will be found, if a sea voyage will be safe, or who your true love will be, all for a hefty price. But to seek such knowledge is to traffic with demons. The Church teaches that any spirits one might see in the dark glass are not angels or ghosts of the dead, but deceitful demons who will show you a flattering vision only to lead your soul to ruin. Historians still debate the practical reality of medieval magic. How many people were truly practicing scryers and how much was just rumor, fear, and fantasy? Was it a genuine underground spiritual practice, or more often a confidence trick played on the desperate and gullible? Regardless of the reality, the idea of the scrying mirror holds a powerful place in the medieval imagination. It is the mirror in its most dangerous form. It reflects not the world as it is, nor your face as it appears, nor even your soul as it should be. It claims to reflect the unwritten future and the unseen world of spirits. It is the ultimate perversion of sight, a tool for looking at things humanity was never meant to see. From a book that guides your soul, to a tapestry that warns of vanity, to a forbidden stone that promises visions, you realize that the few reflective surfaces in your world are weighted with an immense symbolic and psychological power, far beyond their simple ability to show you your face. The years continue to spool out, measured in seasons and harvests rather than in the steady ticking of a clock. Your convex mirror remains on the wall, more a curiosity than a tool, a familiar part of the room's furniture. But the world beyond your castle walls is changing. The slow, steady engine of commerce churns on, and with it comes innovation. From the south, across the sea in Italy, rumours begin to spread among merchants and nobles. They speak of a city built on water, where the glassmakers have achieved something close to a miracle. The city is Venice, and the miracle is a new kind of mirror. The tales sound like fantasy. They speak of looking glasses that are not round and bubbly, but perfectly flat. Not small and distorting, but large enough to reflect a man from head to waist. And not murky or dark, but as clear as the air itself. These new mirrors are made on the closely guarded island of Murano, where the Venetian glassmakers are kept in a state of privileged captivity. A mainstream historical fact is that the Republic of Venice fiercely protected its glass-making secrets. The craftsmen of Murano were given titles, privileges, and paid handsomely, but were forbidden to leave the island on pain of death. Their knowledge was a state secret, a national treasure more valuable than gold. They had perfected a complex method using a tin mercury amalgam on the back of a flat sheet of polished glass, creating a reflective surface of unprecedented quality and clarity. To own such an object is beyond your wildest dreams. The cost is astronomical. These Venetian mirrors are not just luxury items, they are treasures on the level of crown jewels. A single, medium-sized mirror is said to be more valuable than one of your husband's warships, or a country estate with all its lands and tenants. It is the kind of object that kings give to other kings as diplomatic gifts of the highest order. They are so rare, so precious, that their existence feels more like a legend than a reality. It's a bit like hearing today that someone has a personal, functioning spacecraft parked in their driveway. It's conceptually possible, but practically unimaginable. You dismiss it as another tall tale from the world of international commerce. And then one day, it ceases to be a tale. Your husband is a man of rising importance, with connections that now stretch to the great trading houses of London and Bruges. After months of negotiation and an expenditure that makes you feel faint whenever you think about it, a very special cargo arrives at the castle. It is a large, flat wooden crate handled by the delivery men with a reverence usually reserved for holy relics. They pry it open with extreme care, and inside, nestled in a bed of straw and soft cloth, is a flat, rectangular object. They hang it on the wall in your solar, in the spot where the old, distorting mirror once hung. It is a rectangle of light about 2 feet high. The frame is simple, dark wood, but the object it contains seems to sing with a kind of internal brightness. You stand before it, your heart thumping with a mixture of excitement and a strange, unnameable dread. You are about to see yourself. Truly see yourself for the very first time. You take a deep breath and look. The person who looks back at you is a stranger, a complete and utter stranger. For your entire life, your image of yourself has been a composite, a soft focus blend of feelings, second-hand descriptions, and dim, watery reflections. But this is different. This is absolute, unforgiving clarity. Every detail is there, laid bare in the cool, indifferent light. You see the faint, feathery lines that have begun to form around your eyes. You see a small, puckered scar on your chin from a childhood fall that you had long forgotten about. You see that your left eyebrow arches just a fraction higher than your right. You see the tiny, broken veins on your cheeks, the uneven texture of your skin. the exact shade of your eyes, a color you could never have named before, a mix of gray and green. It is a flood of information, and it is overwhelming. The quirky, almost unbelievable tidbit here is that this experience, seeing one's own reflection with clarity for the first time, is a profound psychological event. It can create a sense of dissociation, a feeling that the person in the mirror is not you, but a separate entity, a twin who is silently mocking you. This is the moment of your life's great unfriending. That person in the glass isn't the idealized, generic you that has existed in your mind for decades. She is a specific, flawed, and inescapably real individual, and you're not sure you like her very much. You raise your hand, and she, this silent woman in the mirror, raises hers. The motion is perfectly mimicked, yet it feels alien. The experience is not one of happy recognition, but of a deep and unsettling alienation. Who is that? Historians still debate the psychological impact of the arrival of clear mirrors on the early modern concept of selfhood and identity. Did the ability to see oneself with objective clarity foster a new kind of individualism and self-awareness? Or did it, as it seems to be doing for you now, create a new and profound source of anxiety and dissatisfaction? Before this moment, you could believe you were as beautiful as your husband sometimes claimed in poetic moments. Now, you have the evidence. And the evidence is, well, it's just you, normal, human. There's no romance in this reflection, no mystery. It is a stark, factual document of a face. You stand there for a long time, locked in a silent, staring contest with the stranger who has suddenly taken up residence in your room. The most expensive object you have ever owned has given you a gift you are not sure you ever wanted, the plain, unvarnished truth. You don't smash the Venetian mirror. The cost is too eye-watering, and besides, the initial shock slowly, very slowly, begins to fade. It shifts from being a source of existential dread into something else, a tool. An incredibly precise, unnervingly accurate tool. You learn to use it. You can now see with perfect clarity if your coif is crooked, if you have a piece of spinach in your teeth after a meal, if the intricate embroidery on your new collar is lying flat. The mirror domesticates itself, becoming a part of your daily routine, even if a slightly uncomfortable one. And as these incredible new mirrors slowly begin to trickle out into the world, you start to see their influence reflected in the culture around you. One of the most profound changes happens in the world of art. You visit the studio of a well-known painter in the city, a man commissioned to create a portrait of your family. In a corner of his studio, propped on an easel, is a small, intense painting. It is a portrait of the artist himself. He has painted his own face with a level of detail and psychological intensity that you have never seen before. This is a mainstream historical development. The rise of the clear mirror directly corresponds with the explosion of the self-portrait as a major art form during the Renaissance. Artists like Albrecht Dürer and Leonardo da Vinci, now equipped with these new tools for self-examination, turned their gaze inward, documenting their own features with breathtaking realism. The painter has captured not just his likeness, but his personality. You see the deep concentration in his eyes, the weary set of his mouth, the smudge of green paint on his cheekbone. He has used the mirror not for vanity, but for intense, clinical self-study. It's a revelation. The mirror, which you feared was only a tool for pride, could also be a tool for introspection, for art, for a new way of understanding what it means to be human. The painter has taken the unnerving experience you had, meeting the stranger in the glass, and has turned it into a masterpiece. He has controlled the narrative. It's no longer an alienating experience. It's an act of creation. But even as this new technology creates new forms of art, the old superstitions and fears cling to it like ivy. You're in the kitchen one day when a serving girl drops a small, cheap mirror, a polished piece of steel, not unlike the one you first saw as a child. It clatters on the stone floor, and a collective gasp goes through the room. The girl looks down at the mirror, which is thankfully unbroken, with wide, terrified eyes. Another servant rushes over and mutters, "Praise be, it didn't crack." The fear of breaking a mirror is ancient and deeply ingrained. The belief that breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck is a well-known superstition, but its medieval roots are fascinating. The quirky tidbit is the logic behind it. The fear stems from the old belief that your reflection is a literal piece of your soul, your spiritual twin. To break a mirror was to shatter, damage, or trap that part of your soul. And why 7 years? The Romans, who passed on many superstitions to medieval Europe, believed that the body and soul renewed themselves on a 7-year cycle. Therefore, if you damaged your soul by breaking a mirror, you would have to wait a full 7 years for it to become whole and healthy again. It wasn't just bad luck in a generic sense. It was a long-term spiritual injury. It makes the mild panic in the kitchen make a lot more sense. It's the equivalent of seeing someone narrowly avoid a grievous wound. This idea of the soul's connection to the mirror manifests in one last solemn custom. Your elderly father-in-law passes away after a long illness. He dies peacefully in his bed, surrounded by family. As soon as the priest has administered the last rites and his breathing has ceased, your mother-in-law moves through the room with a quiet, determined purpose. She takes pieces of black cloth and drapes them over any reflective surface in the room. Your precious Venetian mirror is veiled. The small metal mirror on the dressing table is covered. Even the large bowl of water used for washing is emptied. This practice, covering mirrors in a house of mourning, has its roots in a deep, ancient fear. It is believed that a recently departed soul, confused and not yet fully detached from its earthly life, could see its own reflection. In this liminal state, the soul might become trapped in the mirror, unable to move on to the afterlife. It might even be snatched by a demon using the mirror as a gateway. Covering the mirrors is an act of spiritual protection. It is about closing all the windows to the soul, making the rooms safe so that the spirit can depart on its journey without being distracted, captured, or frightened. Historians still debate the precise evolution of these death-related mirror superstitions, tracing their tangled roots through Roman, Germanic, and local folk traditions. But for you in this quiet, dimly lit room, the logic feels clear and urgent. It is an act of final kindness, of spiritual housekeeping. You stand in the now reflectionless room, the world once again opaque, returned to its original, unmirrored state. It feels safe, calm. Looking back, you realize your relationship with mirrors has been a long and complicated journey, from the murky depths of a puddle to the frightening clarity of Venetian glass, from a symbol of sinful vanity to a tool for profound art, from a portal for demons to a trap for wandering souls. This simple object, which we now take for granted, was once heavy with meaning, fear, and magic. It forced a new kind of self-awareness onto a world that was not ready for it. And the echoes of that societal shock still linger in the superstitions we hold today. You glance at the veiled mirror on your wall, a silent, shrouded rectangle, and understand that sometimes not seeing yourself clearly can be the most comforting thing in the world. How to host a medieval dinner party with only turnips. It begins, as so many medieval miseries do, with a look into your larder. The larder is not a pantry full of neatly stacked cans and boxes. It's a dark, cold corner of your house, or perhaps a shallow pit dug into the packed earth floor, covered with wooden planks. This is where you keep what little food remains to see you through to the spring thaw. The season is what the old-timers call the hungry gap, that desperate stretch of time when last year's harvest is all but gone and the new season's growth is still just a frozen promise in the ground. You lift the heavy wooden planks. The smell of damp earth, cold stone, and a faint, peppery sharpness wafts up. A few months ago, this space was a sign of security. There was a side of salted pork hanging from a hook, a sack of hard greyish flour, and a small barrel of dried apples, their skins wrinkled and tough. But the pork is gone, gnawed down to the bone. The flour sack is now just a sad, dusty shadow of its former self, containing only a few handfuls of grit that is probably more mouse droppings than meal. The apples were consumed by Christmastide. All that remains is the foundation of your winter diet, the last line of defense against starvation. You see a mountain. It's a lumpy, pale, sprawling landscape of vegetables, turnips, hundreds of them. They fill the pit, their pale globes pressed against one another, their leafy tops long since rotted away. This right here is why you are still alive. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked in tales of grand medieval banquets is the profound importance of the humble turnip. It was easy to grow, tolerant of poor soil, and stored remarkably well through the brutal winters, making it a cornerstone of the peasant diet. You stare down at your lumpy, purple-topped fortune. You should be grateful. You are grateful. You are also so deeply, profoundly sick of turnips that the mere sight of them makes your soul ache. You have eaten them boiled, mashed, roasted in the ashes of the fire, and added to the thin, watery gruel you call pottage. You have eaten so many turnips, you've begun to suspect your own blood is turning a pale turnipy white. And in this moment of quiet, turnip-induced desperation, a horrible, magnificent idea begins to form in your mind. An idea born of extreme boredom and a deep, gnawing need for human interaction that doesn't involve arguing over who gets the last semi-edible turnip. You will host a dinner party, a feast. The invitations are not written on fine parchment. The next day, you casually run into your neighbors, Ilara and Thomas. They are mending a fence, their hands blue with cold. "Good morrow," you say, your voice full of a confidence you absolutely do not feel. "I was thinking of having a small gathering tonight, a feast of sorts, to brighten the spirits." Ilara looks up, her expression a mixture of surprise and suspicion. Feasts in the Hungry Gap are unusual. "A feast?" she asks, her voice flat. "What's the occasion?" You scramble for a reason. "Oh, you know," you say, waving a vague hand, "to celebrate the ongoing resilience of the human spirit in the face of relentless winter." That sounds suitably grand. "And to share our bounty?" You say the word bounty with as straight a face as you can manage, thinking of the pale, silent mountain in your cellar. You hope they don't ask for details. They are simple, kind people who probably haven't had a conversation about anything other than the weather or the health of their chickens in months. The promise of company and a fire that is not their own is enough. They agree to come. Your plan, your terrible, turnip-fueled plan, is now in motion. Your shopping for the evening's ingredients is a brief but solemn affair. You descend into your root cellar, a single flickering tallow candle casting long, dancing shadows on the lumpy walls of your subterranean treasure trove. You are not just grabbing any old turnips. No, this is for a feast. This requires curation. You hold the candle close, inspecting the pile with the discerning eye of a master chef. You are looking for character, for potential. You select a few small, uniformly round turnips first. These, you decide, will be the appetizer. They are young, you tell yourself, and will therefore be more tender, less aggressively turnipy. You run your thumb over their smooth, cool skin, then you hunt for the centerpiece. After several minutes of careful excavation, you find it. A monster. A gnarled, colossal turnip the size of a human head. It's a beast of a root vegetable, a veteran of the soil. This, you decide, will be the roast. Its sheer size gives it a certain gravitas, a dignity that you hope will distract from the fact that it is, at the end of the day, a single, solitary turnip. This will be the main course. It's the Moby Dick of your cellar. A quirky, almost fringe-like folk belief in some parts of the countryside held that a perfectly round, unblemished turnip was a sign of a good harvest to come. You find one and set it aside, not for eating, but perhaps as a table decoration, a conversation starter, or maybe a paperweight. For the side dishes, you gather a few medium-sized specimens Their purple tops a vibrant splash of colour in the flickering gloom. They have a pleasant heft, a reassuring solidity. Historians still argue about the true monotony of the medieval peasant diet. Did they really subsist for months on end on pottage and a single staple crop like turnips? Or did they supplement this with a wider variety of foraged goods, wild greens, nuts, roots and fungi that simply don't appear in the written records, which were kept by the upper classes? As you stand in your cellar, you wish those historians were here. You would gladly trade this entire mountain of verifiable historical fact for a single, undocumented wild mushroom right now. But there are no mushrooms, no wild greens to be found under the frozen soil. There is only the bounty you have just harvested. You gather your chosen turnips in your arms, a strange and lumpy bouquet, and ascend from the darkness. You have your ingredients. Now comes the hard part, culinary alchemy. You must somehow transform this humble, earthy pile into a meal fit for company. Or at least, a meal they won't immediately regret eating. The vast and ambitious menu for your grand feast exists only in your head, a fragile fantasy you construct to keep your spirits high. In reality, your culinary options are limited. You stand before your hearth, the heart of your home and your only cooking appliance. The fire is low and smoky, casting a warm but unreliable glow over your workspace, a sturdy, knife-scarred wooden table. Your carefully selected turnips are piled at one end, looking pale and unassuming. This is your moment of truth. You are not just a host, you are a magician. And tonight, your magic must transform this single, humble ingredient into a multi-course dining experience. First, the appetizer. The turnip tartare, you decide to call it, in a flash of unearned culinary brilliance. The concept is one of stark, minimalist elegance. You take one of the smaller, smoother turnips you selected earlier. With your only knife, a heavy all-purpose iron tool that you also use for mending leather and threatening unwelcome rodents, you begin to slice. This is not a task for the faint of heart. A raw turnip has the density of a construction brick and the subtle aroma of damp socks. The knife squeaks in protest with each downward push. Your goal is to create slices so thin they are translucent, delicate little discs that will feel, you hope, refreshing and light on the palate. At least, that's the official story. Unofficially, you are slicing them thin because chewing through a thick slice of raw turnip is a journey from which few travelers return. You arrange the pale, waxy discs on a small wooden platter that you've scrubbed clean with sand. You sprinkle them with a few precious grains of salt, one of the few seasonings you have left. The salt is coarse, grey, and probably full of impurities, but it represents wealth and flavour. You stand back and admire your work, the turnip tartare. It looks stark and very white, but it is a dish. It is a start. Next, the centerpiece, the pièce de résistance, the illusory roast. You take the colossal, head-sized turnip, Moby Dick, and place it in the center of the table. You stare at it. It stares back, its lumpy, impassive face a silent challenge. How do you roast something of this magnitude with only a hearth? You can't put it directly in the fire. It would just char on the outside and remain stubbornly, inedibly raw on the inside. You need a more nuanced approach. A mainstream historical fact of medieval cooking is the widespread use of bake kettles or Dutch ovens, heavy, lidded cast-iron pots that could be placed directly in the coals, allowing food to be baked or roasted evenly. You, of course, do not own such a luxury item. So, you improvise. You will swaddle the great turnip. You wrap it in a thick layer of damp dock leaves you scavenged from the edge of the field, hoping they won't catch fire immediately. Then, you encase the entire bundle in a thick layer of wet clay from the riverbank, fashioning a sort of primitive, disposable sarcophagus. This technique, cooking in clay, is ancient and effective. It will steam the turnip in its own juices, softening it from the inside out while the clay shell hardens into a temporary oven. With a grunt of effort, you roll the heavy, muddy cannonball into the embers at the side of the hearth. You have no idea how long it will take to cook. An hour? A day? You'll just have to poke it with a stick every so often and hope for the best. A puff of steam escapes from a crack in the clay, smelling faintly of hot mud and pepper. It is now in the hands of the culinary gods. Finally, you must consider the all-important libation. A feast is not a feast without something to drink. Your options are stark. There is, of course, water from the well. It is cold, clear, and readily available. It is also incredibly boring. You want to offer your guests something with a little more flair. This is where your ambition truly flies off the rails. You are going to attempt to make a beverage. You hesitate to call it wine, but you need a festive name for it. Turnip cordial, perhaps. This quirky and frankly disgusting tidbit is not entirely without precedent. Desperate people have attempted to ferment just about everything throughout history. Your method is simple and probably unsafe. You take several of the medium-sized turnips and boil them for hours in your main cooking pot, creating a cloudy, yellowish liquid that you dub turnip broth. Into this vaguely sweet, earthy-smelling liquid, you crumble the last of your honey cake from a forgotten holiday feast, hoping the lingering yeast will kickstart some kind of fermentation. You pour the resulting concoction into a large earthenware jug and leave it in the warmest corner of the room, near the fire. You have no idea if this will work. It might just turn into a cloudy, slightly sweet turnip soup. It might, through some miracle, develop a faint alcoholic buzz. Or it might develop into a new and exciting form of poison. Historians still argue about the quality and variety of peasant beverages. While ale was a staple, did remote or impoverished households have their own unique, localized traditions of creating fermented drinks from whatever was available? Was there a world of forgotten fruit wines, vegetable concoctions, and herbal infusions? Peering into your jug of lukewarm, cloudy turnip juice, you feel like you are at the forefront of this historical debate. You taste a spoonful. It is not good. It tastes like sad, watery regret. But it is something. You decide to serve the water as the main beverage and present the turnip cordial as a special, celebratory, post-dinner digestive. It's a bold move, one might even say it's a reckless move, but this is your party, your vision. As the clay-encased roast sizzles softly in the fire and the questionable cordial bubbles menacingly in its jug, you feel a profound sense of accomplishment. You have taken the monotonous reality of the turnip and, through sheer force of will, have bent it into the shape of a feast. The food may be terrible, but the ambition is magnificent. With the culinary preparations well underway, the turnip roast slowly smouldering in its clay sarcophagus, and the cordial quietly plotting its revenge in the corner, you turn your attention to the atmosphere. A feast is as much about presentation as it is about the food, especially when the food is what it is. You need to create an ambiance of warmth, celebration, and conviviality so overwhelming that your guests might not even notice they are eating turnips for 3 consecutive courses. Your single room serves as a kitchen, a bedroom, and tonight, a grand feasting hall. The main piece of furniture is your table. It is a humble affair, just a few thick planks of oak laid over a pair of trestles. You give it a good scrubbing with a stiff brush and a bucket of water, removing the accumulated grime of daily life. The wood, when clean, has a pale, soft glow to it. You have no tablecloth, but you do have a small, treasured piece of linen embroidered by your grandmother. It is not large enough to cover the table, but you fold it neatly and place it in the center. It's a small touch of elegance in a rustic world. Next, lighting. This is crucial. A dimly lit room is a forgiving room. It can hide a multitude of culinary sins. Your only light sources are the hearth fire and one precious tallow candle. Tallow, made from rendered animal fat, is the common candle of the people. It sputters, it smokes, and it gives off a faint but distinct smell of cooking meat, which tonight might actually be a welcome aromatic distraction. You place the candle in a simple clay holder and put it on the linen centerpiece. Its single, flickering flame casts long, dancing shadows, making the small room feel intimate and mysterious. A mainstream historical fact is that beeswax candles, which burned clean and bright, were a luxury reserved for the church and the very wealthy. For you, this smoky, smelly tallow candle is the height of evening ambience. You have successfully created a mood. The mood is turnip noir. Just as you are admiring your handiwork, you hear a knock on the door. It's a timid, hesitant sound. Your guests have arrived. You swing the heavy wooden door open, a grand, welcoming smile plastered on your face. There on your doorstep stand Thomas and Ilara. They look cold and slightly apprehensive, as if they are not entirely sure what they have gotten themselves into. But they are dutifully holding a host gift. In their outstretched hands is a small sack. You take it from them, a warm feeling of neighborly affection spreading through you. You shouldn't have, you say, the traditional host's refrain. You peek inside the sack. It is, of course, full of turnips. 4 perfectly nice, medium-sized turnips. It's the medieval equivalent of bringing a bottle of wine to a dinner party where the only item on the menu is wine. You smile, thank them graciously, and add their contribution to the turnip pile in the corner. You're going to need a bigger cellar. Come in, you urge, ushering them out of the cold and into the warm, smoky glow of your home. Welcome to my humble feast. They blink, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. They see the scrubbed table, the flickering candle, the roaring fire. The room does look genuinely welcoming. For a moment, a look of relief crosses their faces. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. You settle them at the table. Thomas, a large man who always seems a bit too big for any room he's in, eyes the single candle with professional interest. Good fat in that candle, he says, an approving nod. Good burn time. This is the pinnacle of scintillating dinner party conversation in your world, praising the host's candle quality. You thank him, and then, taking a deep breath, you announce the first course. Tonight, you say, your voice full of pomp and circumstance, we begin our culinary journey with a delicate plate of thinly sliced garden gems. You can't bring yourself to say the word turnip just yet. You must ease them into the reality of the situation. You present the small wooden platter of raw turnip slices with the flourish of a royal steward. Thomas and Ilara peer down at the pale, waxy discs. There is a moment of profound silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the faint, menacing gurgle of the turnip cordial. They look at the platter, they look at you, they look back at the platter. Ilara, always the more diplomatic of the two, picks up a slice. Oh, she says. How clean. Thomas, a man of simple tastes and direct observations, narrows his eyes. That's a turnip, he says, his voice flat with the certainty of a man who has eaten nothing but turnips for 6 weeks. Indeed, you proclaim, your bright smile not faltering for a second. A winter turnip, known for its invigorating crispness. This is it. The first test. Will they embrace the spirit of the evening, or will they call out your bluff? Ilara takes a tentative bite. Her chewing is slow and deliberate. You can almost hear the crunch from across the table. It's very firm, she offers, a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement. A quirky but debated theory among food historians is whether medieval people had a higher tolerance for bitter or strong flavors, given their reliance on root vegetables and preservation methods. Some argue their palates were simply different, more attuned to earthy, pungent tastes. Others argue they were just perpetually hungry and would eat anything that wasn't actively on fire. Watching your guests chew grimly on their raw turnip slices, you are strongly inclined to believe the latter. Thomas eats a slice in a single, decisive bite, his jaw working mightily. He nods slowly. It is what it is, he declares. It is the highest praise you could have hoped for. The first course has been served. It was not a success, but more importantly, It was not a complete disaster. They have not fled into the night. They are still here. The grand turnip illusion holds, for now. The appetizer platter, containing a few remaining discs of raw turnip that no one seems eager to finish, sits forlornly on the edge of the table. A comfortable silence has descended upon the room, the kind of silence that happens when all three people are privately wondering what happens next, and if it also involves turnips. You decide it's time for the main event. It is time to unveil the centerpiece, the culinary titan you have christened Moby Dick. And now, you announce, rising from your stool with as much theatricality as you can muster. For the moment we have all been waiting for, the roast you use a long forked stick to carefully roll the heavy clay ball from the embers of the hearth onto the stone floor. It is incredibly hot, and small puffs of steam hiss from invisible cracks in its surface. You fetch your trusty, all-purpose knife, which also doubles, apparently, as a geology tool. You tap the clay shell, it's rock hard. Giving it a firm whack with the pommel of the knife, you crack the clay sarcophagus open. A huge cloud of steam erupts, smelling intensely of hot earth, burnt leaves, and a deep, concentrated turnipness that fills the small room. Your guests lean forward, their eyes wide with anticipation. What marvel lies within? As the steam clears, you pry away the clay shards and the blackened leaves to reveal a very large, very pale, slightly greyish turnip. It looks exactly as it did when you put it in, only now it is hot and faintly sweaty. There are a few scorch marks where the clay was thin, giving it a slightly dappled, unhealthy appearance. It is not the golden brown, glistening roast of your imagination. It is a triumphant, unadorned, monumentally cooked turnip. You manage to hoist the colossal vegetable onto a large wooden platter, the same one that moments ago held the raw slices, because you only own one platter. You place it in the center of the table with a heavy thud. It sits there, radiating a damp heat, its sheer size a statement in itself. Thomas and Ilara gaze at it. There is a long pause. "By the saints," Thomas says, his voice a whisper of awe. "That's a big turnip." You beam with pride. "Indeed it is," you say. You take your knife and, with great ceremony, saw off 2 thick, steaming slabs, serving them onto your guests' trenchers, the thick slices of day-old bread that serve as edible plates. A mainstream fact of medieval dining is that these trenchers would soak up the juices of the food, and at the end of the meal they were often given to the poor or to the dogs. Tonight, your guests might wish they could just eat the bread. The art of conversation at your turnip feast is a delicate one. After the initial awe at the sheer scale of the main course has faded, what is there left to talk about? There is only one topic that unites you all, one subject on which you are all now world-renowned experts: the turnip. "The texture is surprisingly tender," Ilara remarks, poking at her slab with the tip of her knife. "Not as stringy as the ones we had last week. You've cooked it well." "It's the clay," you explain, taking on the air of a seasoned culinary expert. "It seals in the moisture, a very old technique." You neglect to mention that you invented it 10 minutes before they arrived. Thomas, ever the pragmatist, chews thoughtfully. "It has a good solid flavour," he declares. "Earthy. You can really taste the ground it grew in." He says this as a compliment. In a world of heavily salted meats and bland pottage, a vegetable that tastes strongly of itself is a novelty. A quirky aspect of peasant food culture is that strong, assertive flavours were not necessarily a bad thing. They were a sign that the food was authentic and unprocessed. Tonight, you are serving authenticity by the steaming slab. For the next 10 minutes, you all engage in a deep, philosophical discussion about the versatile nature of your chosen vegetable. You discuss its merits when boiled versus roasted. Ilara shares a theory that smaller, younger turnips are sweeter. Thomas counters with a detailed argument for the superior nutrient density of the larger, more mature specimen. Historians often debate the level of culinary creativity and discourse among the common folk, questioning whether they simply ate for sustenance or if there was a genuine culture of food appreciation. Your dinner party is living, breathing evidence that when it's all you have, you learn to appreciate the subtle nuances of even the most humble ingredient, or at least you get very good at pretending to. But even the most fascinating turnip-centric conversation must eventually run its course. A lull descends. You can't let the energy die now. The party needs a diversion. It needs entertainment. You clear your throat dramatically. "Have I ever told you," you begin, your voice low and mysterious, "the tale of Sir Reginald the Turnip?" Your guests look at you intrigued. "I don't believe I've heard that one," says Ilara. Of course she hasn't. You are inventing it on the spot. You launch into a grand, rambling epic about a heroic turnip who, dissatisfied with his humble life in the soil, went on a quest. He bravely rolled through dark forests, battled a fierce badger who mistook him for a different kind of root vegetable, and eventually rescued a princess who had been trapped in a tower by a cruel king who hated all things brassica. You give Sir Reginald a booming voice and a noble spirit. Thomas is surprisingly captivated, leaning forward with his mouth slightly agape. Ilara just looks confused but seems happy to go along with it. Your storytelling becomes more and more animated, your gestures more and more grand. The evening has devolved into complete and utter absurdity, and it is wonderful. The great turnip roast sits half-eaten between you, a silent, starchy witness to the heroic saga of its fictional cousin. Your dinner party is a success, not because of the food, but in spite of it. The epic tale of Sir Reginald the Turnip concludes with our heroic root vegetable being knighted by the grateful king and given his own small, well-drained plot of land to rule over. Thomas applauds enthusiastically while Ilara offers a polite, if somewhat bewildered, smile. The entertainment portion of the evening has successfully distracted everyone from the fact that they have just consumed their own body weight in a single vegetable, but a true feast, even a deeply misguided one, requires a final course. It needs a nod, however vague, to dessert. "And now," you announce, your voice now hoarse, from recounting Sir Reginald's climactic battle with the badger, "for something to sweeten the palate." The very word sweet hangs in the air, a shimmering promise of relief. Your guests' eyes light up. Could it be? Has there been a secret stash of honey? A hidden cache of dried fruit? Their hopes are palpable. You feel a small pang of guilt for what you are about to do. You retrieve your main cooking pot from the hearth. In it is the mash you prepared earlier from the medium-sized turnips. You had boiled them for what felt like an eternity, until they collapsed into a lumpy, fibrous, greyish paste. You scoop a generous portion of this steaming glop onto each of your guests' trenchers, which are now soggy and sagging under the weight of the main course's turnip juice. This is the base of your dessert. Then for the grand finale, you produce your most valuable, most prized sweetening agent. It is a small, sticky wooden spoon. Clinging to the very tip of it is a single, perfect, glistening drop of honey. The honey is dark amber, a tiny jewel of captured sunlight and summer flowers. A mainstream historical fact is that sugar was an incredibly rare and expensive luxury, but honey was the primary sweetener for most people, and even then, it was a precious commodity to be used sparingly. This single drop represents the pinnacle of your household's disposable sweetness. With the intense focus of a master scribe illuminating a manuscript, you carefully lower the spoon over the pot of turnip mash. You let the golden drop fall into the center of the grey paste. It lands with a soft, almost imperceptible plink. You give the mash a single, perfunctory stir. "There!" you declare with a grand sweep of your arm. "Turnip pudding with honey essence." You serve the pudding. It looks exactly like boiled mashed turnips. The single drop of honey has been utterly consumed by the sheer volume of tuber, its flavor lost like a single voice in a hurricane. Your guests stare down at their dessert. They know and you know that you have just witnessed the saddest and most performative use of honey in culinary history. Ilara takes a small, brave spoonful. "Oh," she says, her voice full of a carefully constructed surprise, "you can almost taste the bee. It's a lie, a beautiful, compassionate lie, and you love her for it." Thomas, bless his simple heart, just eats his portion with the same stolid determination with which he has eaten everything else. To him, it's just more fuel. The sweet course is complete. The turnip has now successfully infiltrated every part of the meal, from appetizer to dessert. A quiet calm settles over the party. You have done it. You have stretched a single ingredient into a 3-act play of a meal. You are full, your guests are full, and everyone in the room is at least 90% turnip by volume. Suddenly, Ilara stands up with a sense of purpose. "Well," she says, her voice unnaturally bright, "that was a truly memorable feast. Thank you. But the hour grows late and the chickens will be up before the sun." Thomas grunts in agreement, already halfway to the door. Their departure is a study in hasty, grateful flight. You stand at your doorway, waving them off into the cold, dark night. "Thank you for coming," you call out. "We must do it again soon." A non-committal mumble floats back from the darkness. You are fairly certain you will not be doing this again soon, or ever. You close the door, and the silence of your small home descends once more. You are alone with the evidence. The room smells overpoweringly of cooked turnip and hot mud. The single candle has burned down to a smoky, sputtering stub. On the table sit the soggy, uneaten trenchers, a few stray bits of roast, and the sad, congealing remains of the turnip pudding. In the corner, the jug of turnip cordial sits untouched, still quietly fermenting its strange magic. A quirky tidbit from the era is that household waste was minimal. You know that these leftovers won't be thrown out. They will form the basis of your watery pottage for the next 3 days. The feast, in a way, will continue. You survey the scene not with exhaustion but with a deep and profound sense of accomplishment. You had a horrible idea, and you saw it through to its bitter, turnipy end. For a few hours, your small, cold house was a feasting hall. You shared food, however monotonous, and laughter with your neighbours. You fought back against the grey, oppressive boredom of the hungry gap, with nothing but a pile of root vegetables and sheer, indomitable force of will. Historians can argue all they want about diet and subsistence. Tonight, you know that a meal is more than just food. It's a story, and you have just hosted the greatest, and almost certainly the only, all-turnip dinner party in the history of the world. You blow out the candle, plunging the room into darkness, the phantom taste of Sir Reginald the Brave still lingering on your palate.